Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of To The Point Podcast. Hope you guys are doing well today. On a little earlier today, I got a different kind of show for you all today. Normally bounce around, talk about a bunch of different sports, but as I alluded to yesterday, today is going to be primarily a baseball podcast. We are in a bit of a lull in the sports calendar. There was the home run derby last night, which I didn't really watch. I tuned in to see Albert Pujols' first round, and that was it for me. It doesn't interest me. It's a gimmick. I don't like these type of things. People that watched it, I hope you enjoyed it. It's just not for me personally. But it's past the halfway point. You're at the All-Star break. The season's going, right? There's lots happening. Teams are better. Teams are worse than they thought they'd be. We have the trade deadline on August 2nd. So that's just a couple weeks away, just after the long weekend here in Canada. We will have the trade deadline. So a lot to be decided, a lot to discuss when it comes to the MLB season. As always, if anything breaks throughout the podcast, I'll talk about it today. There's still some NHL free agents available. Things could happen. You never know. Trades galore. And I will update that as we go. And if anything happens today, we will talk about it. But I just thought it was going to be a good show to go through some MLB topics, talk about where teams stand, where Noah was right, where Noah was wrong when it comes to these teams, where I saw them finishing, how they're doing to this point. So just a little housekeeping and a little primer for me and for you. This was a good thing for me to go through my notes last night from what I thought prior to the season, to look up statistics, to really dive into it, to make sure I was prepared and have everything correct today. So it's going to be a baseball. We'll talk Blue Jays. We'll talk about a number of different teams today. We're going to go through the entire baseball realm. Of course, the worse the team is, unless they're truly interesting, I'm not going to dive into them that much because they're not really worth my time and not really worth yours. Sorry if you're a fan of the Chicago Cubs or Pittsburgh Pirates today. I will not be going a deep dive into your teams because, quite frankly, you're not relevant. So let's start with just big headlines. As we're at the All-Star break, and I was thinking, okay, what are the three biggest headlines? And for me, I'm starting with, to me, the biggest headline is the Seattle Mariners. And the reason they're the biggest headline for me is prior to this season, the Seattle Mariners were a team I had making the playoffs. I thought they'd be able to push for a division title. I thought the Astros would fall back worse than they have. Kudos to Dusty Baker and that team down there. They lose players. They just keep finding ways to win. They just gut it out. They're still a great team. I didn't think Justin Verlander might win a Cy Young at 39 years old coming off Tommy John. So that's where Noah was wrong, because I didn't think Houston would be as good as they are. I thought they'd be a playoff team, but not this good. I thought the Mariners would make the playoffs before the season. And you watch their first couple months into the year, and I'm looking at this team saying the drought is going to continue. And the Seattle Mariners have not made the playoffs since 2001. That was the season they won 116 games. That's the most in the history of baseball in a 162-game format. And they have not made the playoffs since. Just to put it into perspective, Alex Rodriguez was on the Mariners. Brett Boone was on the Mariners at this time. They had the big unit, Randy Johnson. This Mariners team was loaded, yet they lost in the second round of the postseason, and that drought has stuck with them ever since. They've gone through countless different iterations. King Felix Hernandez had a great run in Seattle. Fun fact, King Felix was the last pitcher to throw a perfect game. That was over 5 years ago. But King Felix had a dominant run. He was the talk of Seattle, KKK all the time for King Felix. But they never could find their way into the postseason. And they went through the Kyle Seager era, the great third baseman. His brother's now a Texas Ranger. But there was never sustained success. And I saw their start to the season, and I said, it's going to be the Mariners, just the Mariners. They have brutal starts to the season, and then they take too long to climb back into it, and they'll end up missing the playoffs by 1 to 3 games. Last year, they missed the playoffs by 1 game, tied with the Toronto Blue Jays. And after their terrible start, and you see teams like the Blue Jays play so well, the Yankees, Houston, and you're looking around saying, well, who are they going to catch? How are they going to get into a wild card spot? But the fact that they've won 20 of their last 23 games is truly astounding. The Seattle Mariners have started their rebound earlier than they usually do. It's normally late July, early August. And we see now the Mariners, as we said at the All-Star break, are in a playoff spot. They are the second wild card team, just behind the Tampa Bay Rays, ahead of the Toronto Blue Jays. And it's such a turnaround. And not to mention this Seattle team, but it's also a team that has a whole lot of star power and is really fun to watch. Ty France is an all-star. He made the all-star team because Mike Trout decided not to play, but nevertheless, he's batting over 300 at the all-star break. The average batting average in baseball is below 240 this season. He's having a great year. Julio Rodriguez is one of the most electrifying center fielders, one of the more electrifying players in all of baseball. He's playing for the Seattle Mariners. The dude is legit. He nearly won the home run derby last night. He lost to, oddly enough, Juan Soto, which I'll get to in a minute. But that is, to me, he's a star. He's already becoming a star and a great guy that Seattle can market for many years to come. Not Ichiro, but a damn good player. They got Logan Gilbert as a starting pitcher. This guy is their ace. He's their horse. In a playoff game where you need to win it, Logan Gilbert would be on the mound. He's got an ERA sub-3. He's playing extremely well this season, and I like him a lot. But Seattle, they have flair. They're winning ball games, and they just seem like a confident team. They're behind in games. They find ways to come back. Their bullpen will come in and give them good innings, and they have bats that can get them back into games. They traded for Carlos Santana from the Kansas City Royals early in the season. The first baseman, he was DFA'd, and then they made a move for him. He's been a great find in Seattle. He's played well, plays well at first. He's hitting home runs. So this team is they're finally starting to see some luck. The job is not done yet. But after being out of the wildcard spot by over 10 games at points in this season, and to be ahead of the Toronto Blue Jays, the preseason favorite to win the World Series, that means something to me, and they deserve a lot of credit for getting themselves back into this position to have the utmost success. Number 2 is Juan Soto. Juan Soto has been the talk of the town all season long. Scott Boras has been saying forever, I want my client to get $500 million. And that's good talk, but when you have $440 million on your lap, it's pretty hard to say no. It's close to $500 million. Get a nice little endorsement deal. You'll get that to an even $500 pretty damn quick. But Juan Soto and Scott Boras must hate Washington so much that they are now basically saying, we're not coming back here. Your team sucks, which they do. And we'll turn down $440 million and gamble that I'm going to get $500 million on the open market come next December. And normally I'd say, well, this is a good bet. Boras would have information from other teams. But I can't say that with Scott Boras because he screws over clients like hookers screw over you know what. So this is a gamble that is crazy to me, a $440 million gamble. We're not talking about dollars and cents here. This is a major, major investment, life-changing money for a young man that, yes, was a part of a World Series team, but has declined. You can listen to the show yesterday, his numbers have declined year over year. He was batting 300 at the beginning of his career. He was batting 250 this year. He batted 287 last year. His RBIs are going down. His batting average is going down. Every statistical category is getting worse year over year for Juan Soto. And yet his representatives and himself are saying, you know what? We're going to get a big ticket. We're going to get term. We're going to get years on the contract in free agency because I have enough faith in myself that we're going to do it. Well, based on play and based on production, this doesn't make any sense. But the reason Juan Soto is a headline is because he's actually, based on what we've seen lately, he's right. Fernando Tatis Jr. the third is my favorite MLB player. He got a 13-year contract over $330 million. He got more money than Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper's a two-time MVP. Tatis has never won an MVP. He's never won a playoff game. So using that knowledge, Tatis injury prone, not a particularly great shortstop defensively, got close to $400 million extension from the San Diego Padres. He's got more red flags than Soto. He's got better power numbers. He's got a better average, but he's also hurt a hell of a lot more. Not to mention Juan Soto has been injured. Fernando Tatis Jr. the third has been injured twice in his career on dirt bike accidents. This season, he's been out the whole season, hasn't played a game. Why? He got hurt riding dirt bikes. Not baseball-related activities, not breaking a wrist because you're swinging too hard at a foul ball, or you hurt yourself in batting practice. This is because he was dirt biking. How he's still collecting a check is beyond me, but that player association in baseball, they're doing their damn job for their players. But just looking at that one example, that would tell you, well, he's durable. He plays every game. He's won a World Series. He was young, wasn't the key cog in it, but he was important. We'll give him the money. This is how baseball works. Baseball hasn't seen this shift where we've seen a lot of production, but maybe the production's going down. We're not going to pay older players. We're not going to give it to guys, and we're worrying about seeing them decline. We haven't seen that shift yet. We've seen it in hockey. Football to a lesser extent, although you're starting to see that with running backs, where running backs aren't getting a second contract. The teams that do give running backs a second contract are hindered for a long time. Look at the Carolina Panthers with Christian McCaffrey, and look at the Dallas Cowboys with Ezekiel Elliott. So, as I look at the situation, Juan Soto is going to get the money. As crazy as the gamble is, he's going to be rewarded for it. He might be traded at the trade deadline, which is even more interesting because that's a nice ad. It's a really good ad at the trade deadline for a team that believes that they can win it all. Where does Juan Soto end up? I mean, this is such a boring answer, but Dodgers or Yankees or Mets. The Mets have really grown into a team that are willing to sign players. Mets have had a fantastic start to the season. We'll talk about the Mets. But the Mets, Yankees, or Dodgers, these are the teams that are going to give out this big a ticket, this big of a contract. Because teams that are in smaller markets, that aren't finding success, that aren't winning World Series, are going to stop doing it abruptly. Give you, for instance, San Diego Padres have the third highest payroll in baseball. I don't think that's going to remain if this team keeps fiddling around being a wild card team. If somehow they flake out, they did last year, miss the postseason, they're not going to be giving the next Fernando Tatis Jr., the next player they have up, next young guy, a big contract because they can't afford it and they're not being rewarded for spending that money. This is all cyclical. Bottom feeder teams will give out a big contract to one player. Juan Soto in Washington. They're trying. They couldn't do it. Philly, they gave a big one to Bryce Harper. Schwarber and Castellanos have come in, but it's not enough. You're seeing, you give out one big contract to one player, and the rest of the team is filled with good players, but not great players. Juan Soto will be acquired by somebody at the trade deadline. If I had to guess, it'll be the Dodgers. Because I believe the Dodgers believe that they can sign him. They can move out contracts. They'll have expiring deals. And quite frankly, they need another bat. The Dodgers, their pitching is phenomenal. Their weakness for this season is their bats. Justin Turner's ice cold. Cody Bellinger can't hit the backside of a barn door. They continue to win games, but it's on the backs of their starting pitchers. Juan Soto would be a terrific ad for the Los Angeles Dodgers for the back half of this season. So Juan Soto is my second storyline. Third storyline from the first half of the season. It's the Los Angeles Angels. I almost had the Blue Jays because they were the favorite to win the World Series, but they're not bad enough that I'm saying, okay, you got to panic. They've been underwhelming. Any Blue Jays fan that believes that, oh, this is what you expected from the Blue Jays, well, I think you're giving your team a pass. I think you're being a little too easy on them for the lackluster effort that they've given you. This might be because a lot of Blue Jays fans are also Maple Leafs fans, so you're used to mediocrity. But this Blue Jays team should be better than they are, but they're still in a playoff position, so I can't kill them that much. But the Los Angeles Angels are truly one of the worst teams in baseball, and they're truly a pathetic organization. This team has the most electrifying player in almost all of sports, has one of the most electrifying athletes since Bo Jackson in Shohei Ohtani. Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, these guys played multiple sports, baseball and football. Michael Jordan to a lesser extent because he was never good enough at baseball. But you catch my drift. Kyler Murray. But what Ohtani is doing, yes, he's playing the same sport, but he's pitching and hitting at the same time and doing both of them tremendously. Last Wednesday, he pitched 7 innings, 1 earned run, and he went 2 for 4 with a 2 RBI triple. A triple and throwing 100 pitches. He's won his last 7 starts. Shohei is a unicorn beyond unicorns. There's nobody like him. Not to mention you pair him with Mike Trout. We've all heard this story before. Maybe the best baseball player ever created, Mike Trout. The great Mike Trout from Philadelphia. They're on the Angels together. And what have they achieved together? What has Mike Trout achieved prior to Ohtani coming? Jack shit. He's competed in 3 playoff games. He's won multiple MVPs. He's been a runner-up 3 times, but they haven't even sniffed a World Series. They don't sniff the playoffs. They fired Joe Madden. Since that time, and they fired him in May, they've won 13 games. I believe they're 13-42. Worst record in baseball. Worst record in baseball since firing a manager in a panic move in order to see if you could turn your season around. This just tells you how pathetic this team is. If you listen to David Sampson, who I had in the podcast, and I encourage anybody to listen to him when it comes to sports business. He's got a podcast called Nothing Personal. He talks all the time about the ownership in Los Angeles with the Angels. How uncertain it is. How they make poor decisions. They don't think it out. It's all about money. It's not about winning. And they've had great players. But Anthony Rendon has been a disastrous signing. Won a World Series in Washington. He's missed at least 60 games in every season he's played in Anaheim. He's missed half the season every year he's played there. He's been garbage he's out for the rest of this season. The most memorable thing he's done in Los Angeles is that he got suspended this year during the brawl with the Seattle Mariners. He hit somebody with his cast, and he was suspended for it. That is what Anthony Rendon, that's his legacy in Los Angeles with the Angels. That's it. That's it. Reed Detmers, Jared Weaver, Michael Lorenzen, the Dark Knight, Matt Harvey. All these pitchers have come through the Los Angeles Angels, Anaheim, and have had no success. But this remains a story because of how pathetic they've been. You have I can't say he is the biggest generator. He's not the biggest star in the sport of baseball, Shohei Ohtani, and the reason is the language barrier. But if I'm tuning in to watch one guy pitch, it's Ohtani. I had the fortune to see him pitch live this season. If anybody has the ability to line up a start for Shohei Ohtani, I highly recommend it. I saw him pitch at Fenway. It was incredible. The dude is superhuman. He can throw 100, and he's incredible. But it's wasted in Anaheim. He's got 1 year left on his contract after this one. I pray he doesn't take a contract extension from the Los Angeles Angels because I think Shohei Ohtani wants to win. Mike Trout took the money and he believed in the Los Angeles Angels management to put a good team around him. That was a bad bet because they hadn't done it his entire career so far. They re-signed Justin Upton, who was old at the time and was a bad fielder, and his bat has gone completely cold. They bought him out. Albert Pujols was signed after his great run in St. Louis. He was terrible in Los Angeles. That was a bad signing. It's just been disaster after disaster for the Angels. Ohtani is a reason to watch down the stretch, but that's the only reason to watch. Part of this story, part of this last headline of the first half of the season is there are a lot of great pitchers on bad teams. That's something you notice. I watch the Marlins every 5th day so I can see Sandy Alcantara pitch. He should be starting the All-Star game tonight, but it's Clayton Kershaw because God forbid you don't start you start a Dodger in Los Angeles. I'll reiterate this point. That's a big reason why I hate the All-Star game. You need to start a Dodger just because it's at Chavez Ravine? Why? If the All-Star game is about playing the best players that deserve to be there, Alcantara should be the starting pitcher. He's got a 1.73 ERA. Dominant pitcher all damn season long. Kershaw's been great, but he's not the starter in this. Put him out second. Is Freddie Freeman the leadoff hitter? Is that how it works too? Because it's in Los Angeles? It's a gimmick. It's stupid. But Alcantara, Miami, they're not making the playoffs. They suck. Ohtani's not making the playoffs with the Angels. They stink. Martin Perez, not so well-known name. He's got the 6th best ERA in baseball this season. Pitches for the Texas Rangers, not making the playoffs. You got to tune in to find these bad teams. But there's a lot of good pitchers on bad teams. Maybe it's bound to happen. But then you look at a lot of teams. What is so funny, you look at teams that are winning that don't have as good at pitching. The Boston Red Sox don't have anybody on their staff that is as good or even close to being better as Sandy Alcantara and Pablo Lopez. Both those pitchers pitch for the Miami Marlins. They both have sub-3 ERAs. They both could have been all-stars. Nobody on the Red Sox roster is better than either of those two guys. Not Eovaldi, not Pivetta, not Chris Sale, who gets injured every time he takes the mound. Doesn't matter. Nobody. But yet the Red Sox are going to be in a position to battle for a playoff spot. Maybe they won't make it. I didn't think they would before the season. They're out of it right now. But nobody there is as good as those two guys. Yet they're in a playoff spot. It's really, truly puzzling when you look at teams and what some of them have done this season with their pitching staffs. I credit it because, hey, good for you because your team isn't that great, but you're finding success. But those are my top 3 headlines so far into the baseball season. The awful Angels, Juan Soto, and just the Seattle Mariners and their crazy turnaround so far this year. You could put the Red Sox in there, but Seattle's above the Red Sox, so they take the cake. And the Red Sox get enough glory. Seattle gets none. So Red Sox fans, you can deal with it. You guys get enough attention. You get talked about enough. I mean, Rafael Devers is my guy. I love him. I think he's batting second at the All-Star game tonight. I'll give him praise, but other than that, and your pitching staff is lackluster, and I don't think you're going to make the playoffs, but we'll see. So I'm going to we'll start talking about every team here, and we're going to start with the American League East, close to home. We'll start with the Blue Jays. Mentioned earlier in the podcast, Toronto Blue Jays have been disappointing so far this year. To think of the team that started the year that was the favorite to get to the World Series and ultimately win the World Series, even better odds than the Los Angeles Dodgers. And if I had to tell you, okay, the team that's favored to win the World Series had to make a managerial change mid-season, you'd think I was crazy. But the Toronto Blue Jays have had an up and down campaign. They fired Charlie Montoyo, and John Schneider is now in at the helm. That's TBD if he's going to be a success. I'm not judging beating the single-A Kansas City Royals last weekend. Beat a real major league team, and then I'll start to evaluate how you are as a skip. I never loved Montoyo. He seemed too laid back to me. He never seemed to give a shit. He didn't have that fire in him. At least Gibby, yeah, he'd lean back. But when Gibby got out there to bitch about a call, you know he meant it. So Montoyo was always a placeholder. He was more or less a puppet of the front office. And my one concern is John Schneider a puppet of the front office? John Schneider's worked for the Blue Jays organization for 14 years. Single A, double A, triple A. He's worked all the way up into he was the coach, the hitting coach or whatever the hell he was for the Toronto Blue Jays. And okay, he's worked with this management group a long time. They've been grooming him. Well, are they grooming him because they know he'll do what they say? Because to me, Montoyo just did whatever I mentioned David Sampson. He talked about when he was in Miami. He was the president. They would talk to the manager before the game and say how long a pitcher is going to go. If he's pitching well, the limit he's going to go is 7. The pitch he's going to throw is 94. There's no feel to the game anymore. I think very few managers just have that feel. I think Dusty Baker does in Houston. I used to think Dave Roberts did in Los Angeles, not after he pulled Kershaw during that perfect game. It's more analytics and how it's worked there. So does Don Schneider have his own ideas? He switched up the batting order where Guerrero is not now batting second, followed by Kirk, and then Bo Bichette is batting cleanup. So they're starting to make some changes. I'm interested to see how that works. The staff for the Toronto Blue Jays this season has been a disaster. Alec Manoa has been a revelation. I thought he'd become an ace. He certainly looks like one. He's been the best pitcher on the staff and by a country mile. Gosman's been good, but Manoa's been better. Manoa stayed healthy the whole year. He's pitching into the 6th, 7th inning every time he gets on the mound, and he's just, you know what you're going to get from him. He's going to throw fast. He's got intensity, and he wants to pitch. He's got a fire that you can't teach. I hate pitchers. I hate players in sports that are just willing to come out of games, that don't fight for it. And there's a difference between being a goalie where you let up 5 goals and you're whining about it, and you don't want to be pulled because it hurts your ego or whatever. You're trying to look like you're a competitive guy, and it's just so transparent, and it doesn't come off that way. Manoa is pitching 7-8 innings, and he wants to finish a game because he hasn't allowed an earned run, because he wants to finish the job. And he got into arguments with Charlie Montoyo about this very thing. He is a stud. He's the best pitcher. He'd start game 1 of a wild card game if the season ended today. We look around. Other than Gosman and Manoa, the staff has been pretty terrible. Jose Barrios was paid to be the ace, day 1 starter. It has not gone well for him. He's pitched extremely well against bad teams. The Royals, the Tigers, Go through the American League Central, the bottom end of it. He loves to pitch against those teams. He'll light them up. The Tigers can't get a hit off him. Kansas City playing whoever the hell they got on their team the last weekend there. Dylan from Nebraska, Jimmy from Idaho, all getting called up. Yeah, he loves facing them. He dominates those level of competition. Tony from Iowa. But you put him against a real team this season, they've knocked his head off. He's got a 5.50 ERA, and it hasn't gone well. He's been a disappointment, period. He hasn't been able to get outs. He gives up runs early in the game, and the biggest issue for him is he doesn't give you length in games. 2-3 innings, you have to pull him, and that is a terrible combination when you have Yusei Kikuchi, who is Mr. 2 innings, who can't get out of 2 innings because the guy is just a hitting machine. Throws pitches and hit after hit after hit, or walk, and before you know it, the bullpen is on the field. The Blue Jays bullpen isn't as bad as it used to be. I like Simber. I like Garcia. David Phelps has been a really good signing. Romano is one of the best closers in baseball. But when a bullpen is overworked, it struggles. And that's what's happened this year. You had Ryu, who wasn't giving you length early in the year. He's been out for a while. And then you have Kikuchi, who is Mr. 2 innings. Barrios was Mr. 3 innings for a while. And to think Ross Stripling, a.k.a. Chicken Strips, who was a bullpen arm but then turned into a starter, flexed around, is now a guy that's going to, who's going to give you 5 innings. Every time he gets on the mound, he can normally give you 5 innings, and that's a nice thing to have. So the staff for the Blue Jays has been the biggest disappointment. Even more than the bats, and the bats haven't been great because they're not, with runners in scoring position, they are 13th in the American League. Vladdy's had a disappointing season thus far, no doubt about it. Bichetta's had a disappointing season thus far. Alejandro Kirk has been the revelation. He's been their best hitter. Espinal has been a good story, who's really turned into an everyday second baseman. He's at the All-Star game tonight because of injuries and players pulling out due to rest and other factors. This team is still very good. And while I mentioned they weren't one of my big headlines to start this podcast and to start the first half of the baseball season, it's because they're in a playoff spot. They're 2 games up on the Boston Red Sox for the final wild card spot. With the expanded playoffs, they are in it. Again, if it was normal, they would not be in a playoff spot. It's expanded playoffs this year, so they're in a good position. To me, the Toronto Blue Jays are a much better team than the Boston Red Sox. I mentioned the Red Sox staff with Pivetta and Evaldi, and they just don't have the depth. They don't have the great pieces that the Toronto Blue Jays has. Looking at the Boston Red Sox, Rafael Devers is a stud. He's one of the best third basemen in baseball. I give him a ton of credit for being a guy that came into the league overweight and a guy that looked like a guy that was going to be Vladdy 2.0, that was never going to be able to play third base. He's turned himself into a very solid third baseman and has one of the best bats in baseball. And has great power numbers as well. So he's great. JD Martinez is still batting over 300. Mostly a DH, will play left field, but he's been a really good player and Bogarts as well. These 3 guys are their 3 big bats. But you look at the rest of the lineup, it gets thin. Bobby Dalbec, a guy they really hope would be a great project, be a great player at first base, has disappointed. He's batting close to 200 this season. Doesn't have a whole lot of confidence. Jackie Bradley Jr.'s bat's never been great. He's in the field. But you go throughout the lineup, they just don't have the depth that the Blue Jays do. And also the Red Sox bullpen with Diekman and Ryan Brazier. And also the fact that some of these guys aren't vaccinated and can't pitch in Toronto is a big worry for the Red Sox moving forward. So that's going to be something they need to address at the trade deadline, is get some bullpen help if they don't decide to implode the roster altogether. So, not to mention Chris Sale injured his thumb in his first start since coming up from AAA on the rehab start. He's going to miss some time. So I think the Blue Jays are in good shape to make the postseason. They are not going to catch the Yankees. And here's where a big number one where Noah went wrong. The start of the season, I believe the New York Yankees were going to miss the playoffs. I couldn't be more wrong. They have the best record in baseball. Aaron Judge has 33 home runs, which is tied for Roger Maris for the most ever by a Yankee at midseason. Giancarlo Stanton's had success. The most impressive stat is health. They have 5 starters that have given them 16-plus starts this season. We always lament injuries. We have to give more credit to health. It's not just luck that you're healthy. It's also being ready, being physically prepared. Nestor Cortez, Severino, Jordan Montgomery, all these guys have made 16-plus starts. And they deserve credit for being in that position. So kudos to the Yankees. They also have Chapman coming back in the bullpen. Chad Greene will eventually be back. Zach Britton will likely be off the injured list at some point, potentially later in the season. The Yankees bullpen is still a position that could be improved. For a lot of these teams, David Robertson in Chicago would be a top-notch add for me. He's their closer this season on a bad team. He will have some value. He's pitched in New York before, so they have familiarity with him. They obviously love Clay Holmes, who's emerged as their new closer, but getting David Robertson would stop other teams from acquiring him. The Rays may have interest in David Robertson from the Cubs. They've done a lot of business with the Cubs over the years when it comes to trades and landing players. So you look at the AL East, the Yankees are the clear favorites. They're not going to give up this big of a lead. They're too good of a team. They're too healthy, and they got a whole lot of confidence. They're winning all these games while they still have Joey Gallo on the roster. Joey Gallo is batting 167. He might be a great left fielder, but he can't hit the backside of a barn door. And I found this stat. This is a really interesting one. Joey Gallo, if you're not familiar with him, he's a power bat. Was in Texas, then got traded to the Yankees. The trade didn't make sense to me at the time last year. Still doesn't. They already had Stanton, and they had Judge on the roster, the Twin Towers, who normally don't hit for great average and mash home runs. Joey Gallo is like that, but worse, where his average is normally below 200, and he's not a guy that drives in a whole lot of runs. But Joey Gallo has played a lot of baseball. He's played almost 10 seasons in the major leagues, and he's played at least 120 games every year of his career. So he's a durable guy. In those 9+ seasons of baseball, Joey Gallo only has 2 sacrifice flies, meaning he only has two times in his entire career where he flew the ball out to right, left field, center, wherever, and the runner tagged up to go score. This is an incredible stat because it just tells you every time he gets in a position, he might hit a home run every once in a while, but he's striking out majority of the time. On his at-bats this year, he struck out 45% of the time. To me, he's not going to be playing come playoff time because you just can't. I'd rather have a guy that, okay, he might be less power. He might just be a singles guy, but is he going to drive in a run? So I think the Yankees need to decide on what they're going to deploy with their playoff lineup. Joey Gallo would not be a part of it for me just because he's not a team player, and he's a guy that just swings for the fences every time. He's a terrible bat, and I still look at that trade as a really stupid one from the Yankees to get Joey Gallo in the first place. But the Tampa Bay Rays are still going to be a threat. G-Man Choi's had a great season for the Rays. Again, they've gone through guys. Brett Phillips remains there. Brandon Lau missed the entire first half of the season. Kevin Kiermaier might miss the rest of the regular season, was announced because he got injured. But they still find ways to win. Josh Lau was promoted from AAA. He's played well in right field. Shane McClanahan is starting the All-Star game tonight for the American League. He's been fantastic. So the Rays just continue to plug along. They continue to have successful seasons. And I think the Rays, for them, they don't spend a lot of money. They get a $40 million payroll, and they're still this good. but also add to it at the trade deadline, which they normally do. Last year at the trade deadline, they went out and got Nelson Cruz. That ultimately didn't work out. For me, I would look at the bullpen, see what you can add there to make that position even better. Robertson could be a closer. It could also be a middle innings guy for the Tampa Bay Rays. And they have a team that can compete. They're in the first wild card spot. You want to remain there. They should be battling with the Blue Jays a lot down the stretch. The two teams play each other a lot. I mean, looking at the both play the Orioles quite a bit. The Orioles also in this division have been a great story. They're 3.5 games out of the final wild card spot. Yet the Orioles have the second toughest schedule remaining in all of baseball. They deserve credit for being relevant at the All-Star game. That's what I can say for this team. They've never been relevant at the All-Star game in so many years. They are 46 and they are 500 at the All-Star game. The Red Sox are 3 games above 500. Blue Jays 7. That just tells you how competitive this team has been. Brandon Hyde has managed this team with very little elite talent. Trey Mancini's a veteran. He's a good player. He's been in Baltimore a long time. He's a guy that you look at, but he's not a big name. He's not a sexy. He doesn't drive you to the ballpark. Jorge Mateo is not a guy that brings it. Cedric Mullins is a great leadoff hitter. Baltimore doesn't have players that make you go, wow, I really want to tune into the Orioles game tonight, but yet they continue to find ways to win. So the Orioles deserve credit for being where they are. But despite the success, I expect them to have a bad second half because their schedule is just so difficult. They have to play the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays have only played them 4 times this season, and I believe they play them 12 more, something like. So that's 3 series against the Blue Jays in the last couple months. That's a lot of tough matchups where the Blue Jays will be desperate to get wins. And then, although the Orioles split the first 4 games, and that really set them off to have a really successful second half of the opening campaign, I expect them to fall back and ultimately finish dead last in this division where they ultimately sit right now. So that's the American League East. Orioles, you definitely say I was wrong because I didn't think to be, but they got the Yankees coming up on Friday. Not an easy matchup for them, but you look at it, Trey Mancini's batting .277. That's his best ever at an All-Star break. Austin Hayes has been good. Anthony Santander. Tyler Wells has been a great pitcher for them. He's really their ace. He's a guy they drafted, and he's developing into a star. So kudos to Baltimore and doing it without John Means, who is one of their better pitchers as well. So I expect the Yankees to win this division. There's not going to be that big of a fall off. I expect the Blue Jays to make the postseason, and I also expect the Rays to make. I'll stick to it that the Red Sox are not going to make the playoffs. They are not in the postseason position right now. So I'm going to ride with that down the stretch. AL Central. American League Central has been an interesting division to say the least because before this season, I thought it was the White Sox and then everybody else. I thought the Chicago White Sox were the class of this division. Jose Abreu, the former MVP. You got Dallas Keuchel. You got a great team. Tony La Russa's back as manager. Tim Anderson is one of the best hitters in all of baseball. And yet it's been nothing like that for the Chicago White Sox. They are 3.5 games back of the wild card spot, 3 games back of the Minnesota Twins, who are currently in first place. The Twins have been the story of this division. Luis Arias, their leadoff hitter, is batting .346. He has the best batting average in all of baseball. He's just a guy that hits singles, hits doubles. He's just always on base. Byron Buxton has found his home run swing, not as much pressure, and the team's playing extremely well. Sonny Gray, a pitcher they acquired from the Cincinnati Reds, has been fantastic so far this year. The Twins have just been a really good story. Rocky Baldecki is one of the youngest managers in baseball, and yet he's finding success with this Twins club, despite the fact that you trade Donaldson, you get a Gary Sanchez that I didn't think would be a great move. He's not, he doesn't have a great average. He never does, but he's found success in Minnesota to some degree. Gio Urshela has continued his good play in Minnesota. So Minnesota has just been a team you didn't expect to see, but I expected the White Sox to have such a lead but they are in third place in this division because the Cleveland Guardians are in second. The Guardians who offloaded players, the Guardians who said, you know what, we're just going to trade guys away. We're not a great team anymore. They are in second. Jose Ramirez continues to play. He was nearly traded before the season. He's in the MVP discussion in the American League, to me. My three favorites right now are Yordan Alvarez of the Houston Astros, Aaron Judge, of course, of the New York Yankees, and Jose Ramirez, just because of how valuable he's been to this team. If we look at this roster for the Twins, Carlos Correa's missed games, still playing well. Buxton has a bad average, but he's playing well. Nick Gordon, Gary Sanchez, Jorge Polanco has been good. Max Kepler. This Twins team just finds ways to win. They got a good bullpen, and the Guardians have just been a really, really good story. That's all I can say about them, is that I didn't expect them to be this good. I expected Jose Ramirez to be this good because that's Jose Ramirez. He's one of the best second basemen in all of baseball. But this team just, the whole season, you just felt something about this Guardians team. And, they've benefited from playing the Tigers and playing the Royals for sure. But the Guardians have played extremely well against the Chicago White Sox, have ultimately played pretty well against the Minnesota Twins, and they're in second place as we currently sit. And I look at this team, Ahmed Rosario has been great. He's got a 2.9. This team has just got a good average. Steven Kwan's batting 279. Jose Ramirez is batting 288. Andres Jimenez, who's at the All-Star game tonight, is batting 296. Nick Jones is batting 333. They are a different team because you're not used to seeing this. They're an average team. They will hit home runs. They got Josh Naylor, who's also a great player. They got Owen Miller. Josh Naylor, to me, is a Canadian first baseman, can also play the outfield, has been a really good player for the Guardians this season. He's batting 253, but he's got some decent power and he's had some success. So I look at the White Sox. They had Dallas Keuchel was released from the team earlier in the season because his numbers were so bad. He had 2 years left on his deal, so that didn't go well. They lost Carlos Rodon to the San Francisco Giants. They badly missed him. He's such a key pitcher. He's a clutch pitcher. He's pitched in big moments. They miss him dearly. And the White Sox they're starting to find their stride. I think they're upset it's the All-Star break because they were having momentum heading into it. Tim Anderson had gotten back from injury. Abreu, who had a slow start, is now batting above 300. And that's what you expect from a guy from Jose Abreu, who's just a clutch hitter. He's got power. Andrew Vaughan has been fantastic. He's a guy that will DH. He'll play some first base. He also played the outfield. He's been really good for the Chicago White Sox. So I'm not giving up on the White Sox yet. They're in a position to compete for a wild card spot, and they're in a position to catch the Twins. Because to me, the White Sox are still the better team in this division. The White Sox still have more talent. Yes, the Twins have the lead right now, but the White Sox you look at that roster, you look at their starting pitching, and I go, well, I like it a little bit more. And they've had guys disappoint them this year, for sure. Not to mention their bullpen, where Liam Hendricks had a terrible start to the year. He did. But he's now in the All-Star game. He blew his first 3 saves, but he's rebounded. He's found his stride a little bit, and he's now made the All-Star team. That's what you expected from Liam Hendricks when you go out there and give him a lot of money in free agency. Chicago could be a team that adds. They're in a position that's dangerous if you're going to add a player. They do. Eloy Jimenez has missed the entire season. That's a big loss. It's a big bat that hasn't been around for this team. But for me, the biggest thing is their pitching. Can you find pitching at the trade deadline? Would Paul Blackburn, would Oakland be willing to part with him? Would Merrill Kelly, I think he'll be available from the Arizona Diamondbacks, who will not be making the playoffs. There are guys going to be available, and Chicago needs to target pitching. Their bats are fine. They will be able to sustain it. Josh Harrison off the bench isn't a bad guy to have. He's got a lot of success and he's got a lot of experience at the major league level at Pittsburgh and what he was able to accomplish there. They need to find starting pitching, period. Pay for it, because you get into the postseason, you never know. Not to mention, you win your division, you get to play the worst wild card team, and you're in a better position from there. They need, to me, pitching is the White Sox biggest need. For the Twins, I think they're in an interesting position as well, because they got the youngest manager in baseball. I don't think they expected to have this much success. I think they expected to be okay, potentially compete for a wild card spot. But this is an interesting division, because the Guardians didn't expect to be this. I know that definitively. But I look at the White Sox. Dylan Cease is their ace. He's their best pitcher. Johnny Cueto's been very solid. I keep him. Lucas Giolito's had a really bad season. Joe Kelly hasn't been available. Michael Kopech, Ronaldo Lopez, they put him in the bullpen. Lance Lynn's been a disaster. They need 1 to 2 starting pitchers at the trade deadline if they want to make the playoffs and make some noise. So that's where I look to the White Sox. That's where they need to improve. Rest of the division, Kansas City's terrible. None of their players are vaccinated. Andrew Benintendi will be traded somewhere at the trade deadline. But what makes it even more interesting is I think the Blue Jays would have interest in Benintendi, but he's not vaccinated. So he wouldn't be able to play for the Blue Jays. He said he hasn't made up his mind if he would get vaccinated if a trade was on the table to the Toronto Blue Jays. So he needs to make up his mind. It's only been 2.5 years. So again, make that decision and say, no, I'm not going there. And then the Detroit Tigers have been a huge disappointment to me. Miguel Cabrera has actually had a pretty solid season. He's batting close to 300. He's had a good season. None of their pitchers really have. Spencer Torkelson, their prospect at first base, just got sent down to AAA. He's not having Shane Greene has what got recalled recently. He's a fantastic player in center field. But it's been a disaster season for Detroit. I expected them to compete, and they haven't. It was over from the beginning for the Detroit Tigers. That first month, it was completely over, and it's better luck next year to them. I expected them to be better. They are 37-55. They're 18 games below 500. The Kansas City Royals are only 1 game worse than the Detroit Tigers. That's how bad it's been for Detroit. Again, maybe I just have too much faith. I love Miguel Cabrera. I love what he brings to the table. But seeing this Tigers team still struggle to find success, struggle to be competitive year in, year out, I thought it would turn around before now. And it's not because Miguel Cabrera is still on the roster that this team isn't any better. That's for sure. To round out the American League, we have the American League West. Talked about this team before with the Angels. I won't go too far in depth with the Angels, where I stand on them. Houston, crazy. Yordan Alvarez is one of the MVP favorites, MVP frontrunners in the American League. He's just mashing home runs. The runs batted in. To me, old school stats are still the ones that ring out. I like runs batted in. I like average. To me, those are still the most valuable. Your launch angle, on base percentage is important, but I don't care about your launch angle. I don't care about these stats when it comes to Saber metrics and this crap. What's your average, and are you driving in runs? And you're looking, if you're batting 3rd or 4th in the order, you got a pretty good average, and you're driving in a pile of runs, I think you're pretty damn valuable. Pete Alonso leads the entire Major League Baseball in runs batted in. He's got almost 80 on the season. To me, he's having a fantastic year. Yordan Alvarez is having a great year. And Pete Alonso's got 78 runs batted in. He's a first baseman. Yordan Alvarez can play the outfield. He plays DH most of the time with the depth that Houston has there. He's got 71 runs batted in. Yordan Alvarez also is mashing. He doesn't have as many as Aaron Judge, but he's second in all of baseball in home runs. So to me, he's been a great story. At times, you looked at the player and said he strikes out too much. He doesn't have plate discipline. He worked on it in the offseason. He's got 26. So he's got 26 home runs. He's fourth in baseball. It goes Judge, Kyle Schwarber, who has 29. Although I'll look at it. Kyle Schwarber has 29 home runs. He's batting .204. So to me, he's not as valuable as Austin Riley, who's third with 27. And then Alvarez, who's got 26, followed by Pete Alonso, Stanton, and Mike Trout. So Jordan Alvarez has been great. Altuve is still there. He missed time, but this team it's next man up. Pena has filled in at second base. He's played some shortstop. He's been fantastic. Houston just got depth. Christian Javier is a solid starting pitcher. I mentioned Justin Verlander. The guy is out of this world. To me, he's the favorite to win the American League Cy Young. You could look at McClanahan, but to me, if the Houston Astros finish with a better record, if they win their division, to me that launches Verlander ahead a little bit just because he's winning more ball games. McClanahan might be in Tampa Bay, but they're not going to catch the Yankees. I think you do have to value winning when it comes down to it. It's something that definitely comes into discussion for me, is how many wins do you have in your record? When you were on the mound, how did your team stack up? As we currently stand, Justin Verlander, who has a 1.89 ERA so far. His last pitch was Saturday, was 6 innings. He had 10 strikeouts. He's coming off Tommy John surgery. But you got Javier, you got Framber Valdez, you got Verlander. This team has depth at starting pitching, and these guys can go 6 innings every night. He's 12-3 so far with a 1.89 ERA with 108 strikeouts, only 19 walks. 109 innings following Tommy John surgery. That's tough to beat. Justin Verlander and how good he's been this year. If he continues, he's going to win the Cy Young because McClanahan, I'll look that up for you, but I know he doesn't have 12 wins because the Rays just aren't as good as the Houston Astros so far this year, and they're winning a lot of Verlander starts. Let's be honest here. I'll find it, McClanahan's last start for you as I dig through the archives here. But to me, Verlander is one of the heavy favorites to win the American League Cy Young, and he'll be at the All-Star game tonight at Chavez Ravine. So I love the Houston Astros pitching depth. I really didn't look at that enough. They got decent offense, but you look, George Springer's left, Carlos Correa's left, two of the biggest names and two of the biggest reasons they had all that success, and they're still winning. They're still winning. It's crazy. Kudos to Houston. They've gone through a lot with the scandals, people hating them, but they continue to find ways to win, continue to ways to find success. And Seattle's a very good team, and yet they have a sizable lead on them in that division. I mentioned Seattle. I like their team a lot. I think they will make the playoffs, but they're not catching the Houston Astros, so they'll have to settle for a wild card spot. Texas Rangers. Texas spent the most money out of any team in baseball in the offseason in free agency. They spent over $300 million to get Seager, to get Marcus Semien. And, I mean, just to put it matter of fact here, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. I truly don't think it has because, and I'll tell you why. It took Marcus Semien a month and a half to hit his first home run. Corey Seager is not having the success he thought he would. Martin Perez has been a great story pitching, but Texas is 4.5 games out of the final wild card spot, and again, they're paying all that money. They're not going to make the playoffs. Oakland's trash. We knew they'd be. The Angels are trash, but Texas spent all that money, and now they want to compete with the Angels. Spending a ton of money and being a complete non-factor in the entire sport. That is where they're shaking up here. That's what they want to be. The Texas Rangers. You have two big name players in Marcus Semien, who was the runner-up for MVP last year in Toronto, and Corey Seager, who's a World Series champion with the Dodgers, one of the best shortstops in the game. Okay? What else you got? Not a whole lot, because you spent all the money on these two players. You didn't address pitching, and your team's going to miss the playoffs likely again. They've been searching for an identity since the Blue Jays series in 15-16 in Texas. The Blue Jays were able to find one through drafting and developing. Texas is trying to do it through free agency. It rarely works. Where you build a team through just free agency without drafting key players that will lead to ultimate success, and that's what happens. It rarely works. I could be wrong here. I don't think I will be. But I have my doubts about the Texas Rangers and their success long-term. These two signings could be looked at not too far down the road as some of the dumbest in all of the sport because of the success that they ultimately don't have. But that's the American League. Now we got the National League. Start with the NL East. To me, the Mets are a really good story. I thought the Mets would be a good team. I didn't think they'd make the playoffs. I thought the Braves would win the division. I'm not backing off that opinion. As we currently sit, the New York Metropolitans have a 2.5-game lead over the Atlanta Braves for the division. Pete Alonso, as I mentioned, has been one of the best hitters in all of baseball. He's got 78 runs batted in. He's batting .276. He's been a great player. Jeff McNeil's been a great find, bottom in the lineup. And to me, something I love about the Mets that a lot of teams don't have anymore is they got a legit leadoff hitter. Brandon Nemo is a guy you probably never heard of. No, it's not a fish. This guy is an outfielder. But he is just a leadoff. He's a pain in the ass. He'll give you an 8-9 pitch at bat to start a game, and he'll take a walk. He'll walk, and that's a tough way to start a game when you have a pitcher, you have a batter that's going to make your life difficult, and then you have a guy on base who's got speed and makes the pitcher think 5 minutes into a game. That's one thing I love about the Mets roster. Another thing you have to give the Mets a ton of credit for is they are first in their division, and they haven't. Max Scherzer has made 5 starts. DeGrom has made none. They haven't had either of these guys for much of the season, and this team has played well. Carlos Carrasco is not a number 1, number 2, number 3 pitcher. He's got a lot of wins. His ERA is starting to rise, and it's because he's being asked to do more than he's used to. He's a 4 or 5 starter. Perfect world. He's likely in your bullpen come the playoffs. But the Mets' 2 biggest additions here are the 2 biggest deadline acquisitions. I don't expect them to do that much. Is you're going to get Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom back. Hopefully completely healthy for the rest of the year. You have 2 of the best starting pitchers added to your lineup to complement David Peterson, to complement Taijuan Walker, who's continued to be fantastic wherever he goes. He was great in Toronto. He's moved to the Mets. He's had success with the Metropolitans. This is a good team. Eduardo Escobar was a good signing for the Mets. They are legit for sure. To me, they're making the playoffs. They got a whole lot of confidence. And Steve Cohen spent a lot of money on the Mets, building a roster that is competitive and getting them out as being a bottom feeder in general, just as a franchise, not comparing it to the Yankees, just in general. But for all the money he spent, this is about winning World Series, not about beating the Braves for the division title or making a wild card team. Steve Cohen has to have the expectation that this team is going to win the NL East and then win the World Series, because to me, he'll look at every avenue at improving this team at the trade deadline if there's something that he can do. But also, he signed those 2 guys in the offseason. You're in a position to win the division. Get it done now. Atlanta Braves had such a slow start, but they're starting to find their game. They're too good of a team not to. Austin Riley, who I mentioned, is 3rd in the majors in home runs with 27. He's, I believe, 5th in runs batted in. He's been a great player this season, the 3rd baseman for the Atlanta Braves. Ronald Acuna is starting to come back healthy. You're starting to see Acuna really find his game again. They lost Ozzie Albies to a broken hand, so he's out for some time. Their starting pitching hasn't been as great as it was last year. Ian Anderson got roughed up. Kyle Wright has been a good pitcher for the Braves, a good find that necessarily wasn't a huge part of the team that won last year. But the bullpen has been their biggest advantage. Jesse Chavez, who they got, can pitch multiple innings, a former starter pitcher. He's been really good. Tyler Matzik is great when you need him to. He was phenomenal all postseason long last year. They got the big man from the Dodgers to come in and close games. So I like the bullpen for the Braves, and not to mention, I like their bats. They got a solid team. Marcelo Zuna, he's always going to be a frustrating guy because he strikes out so often. But they have a team that can drive runs in. They have a team. Matt Olson, to me, is a guy that is still finding his way. He's replacing Freddie Freeman. That's not an easy task for him to replace an Atlanta legend. But Atlanta still looks like, and we know what the identity of this Atlanta Braves team, we know what Alex Anthopoulos is all about. To me, he's going to look at this roster and say, what's my biggest weakness? How can I add? And to me, it's a starting pitcher. He could use another starting rotation type guy. You look at Oakland, you look at Arizona, don't look at the Angels. They got nothing to offer. Potentially Baltimore, if they have a slow start coming back and they might want to trade away. I wouldn't trade Tyler Wells because I think he's a guy that you can build around for many years to come. Cincinnati's had a good comeback when it comes to what they've done, but they're a team that could part with some players. Hunter Greene is unlikely to be traded, but they do have some veterans on that roster. Wade Miley is a guy that could be available for teams. So looking at the bottom feeder, Pablo Lopez in Miami, to me, he will be traded, and he'll be the biggest fish. Whoever can land him, he will be a great find for teams. Potential another Kyle Freeland in Colorado as well. So Braves and Mets both are extremely good teams, but I expect the Braves to have a very good second half as they did last year and win the National League East. They're too good of a team. The Mets haven't had a whole lot of problems yet. They'll go through a long skid, and I expect the Braves to be consistently good the remainder of the season. Philly's also in this division. Philly is not done yet either. To me, they're a team that is very much wild card central. They're 8.5 back in the NL East, but they'll compete for a wild card spot. They haven't had Bryce Harper for a number of weeks now. He's been injured, so they haven't had him at their disposal. Kyle Schwarber is second in the majors in home runs with 29, but his average is horrible. But the crazy thing for Philly is they were the opposite Angels. They fired Joe Girardi, and Rocky Thompson has been a great guy to fill in. They have the third best record in baseball since the firing, and they've had a ton of success. Zach Wheeler has had a revelation season. He's starting to really look like the old Zach Wheeler. Kyle Gibson is pitching well. Aaron Nola is another guy who's been fantastic for the Phillies. He went 7 1/3 in the last start before the All-Star game. So they're getting decent starting pitching. And looking at the National League wild card, Philly is going to be competing with San Francisco, and they're going to be competing with St. Louis. Milwaukee and St. Louis are a half game apart, so you could say you're battling with both those teams. But I like Philly starting those three starting pitchers against. You look at the San Francisco Giants, Carlos Rodon, Logan Webb, both excellent pitchers, but Anthony DeSclafani's had a really tough season. It gets a little thin after that. So I look at advantage when it comes to starting pitcher. That's definitely advantage Philadelphia. Looking at the Cardinals, Miles Michaelis has had a fantastic season. Even at the age of 40, Adam Wainwright has pitched extremely well. And they've had a few guys here and there pitch well, but to me, when it comes to starting pitching, Philly has an advantage. To me, it'll just be what can their bats do. When the home runs dry up, Philly's team dries up. Alec Baum is one guy hitting for a decent average. Schwarber, again, Bryce Harper's hurt, but they need guys to hit consistently because I like their pitching better than the other two teams I expect them to be battling with the remainder of the season. I mentioned Pablo Lopez in the Marlins in this division, and then there's Juan Soto. He's in the Nationals. I think Soto will likely be moved. I'm interested to see if any team would want to acquire Nelson Cruz. He's 42 years old. He's not having a fantastic season, but he could be a designated hitter for a team that is looking for another veteran bat who's played in a lot of baseball. He was traded last year to the Tampa Bay Rays at the trade deadline. So potentially there would be interest, but it's a year later. But he is a guy I think Washington will want to trade because they know they're not making the playoffs. They're not going anywhere. And he's a bat that can help them next season because I expect this to be his last one in baseball. So Washington will be on a fire sale. Whoever they can deal, they'll deal. They might have to trade Juan Soto just because they know they're going to lose him, and you can't lose him for nothing. Nelson Cruz could be available. And after that, Josh Bell might be their biggest. He's a first baseman that does hit for power, but he's having a fantastic season. He's a guy I'm sure teams want, and I think Washington would trade him for the right price if they can get a good haul of prospects back in return. And I mentioned the Marlins. I think we'll have some good pitchers available for teams on the open market if they want to pay for them. National League Central, just talked about the Cardinals. Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt have been fantastic. Wainwright, Michaelis. I think St. Louis and Milwaukee, they're separated by a half game. Each team will want to be aggressive. You look at Milwaukee. Corbin Burnes is their ace, and they got Brandon Woodruff, who's always available to start, although he hasn't had as good a season as we normally expect him to. He started opening day, but he hasn't been great. Freddie Peralta is a guy they love, but he's been injured. So I think Milwaukee will be searching for another starting pitcher. Josh Hader is the best closer in baseball, so Milwaukee has that going for them. But I expect Milwaukee to look around and see what they can do to improve their starting pitcher. Just when it comes to injuries, they also have Cole Hauser, who is injured right now. So he's another. They got some injuries in starting pitching, and Milwaukee will want to make the postseason. Both these teams, to me, I think both teams' mindset is we cannot miss the playoffs. St. Louis has got Arenado. They got him in free agency. He's the best third baseman in baseball. He's one of the best players in baseball. Not to mention he's my favorite player. But he's a phenomenal guy. If you watch a lot of Cardinals games, you'll see him do something fantastic every night. Paul Goldschmidt is having he's almost batting 340. He's top 5 in RBIs. He's got 20 home runs. He's just been fantastic. He's in the National League when it comes to MVP. I look at it, a number of guys. I got Pete Alonso, so he's on the list for sure. I have Paul Goldschmidt. So there's two first basemen. And then for my third guy, it's really up in the air. The Dodgers don't have a key guy that I look at and say, well, he's having such a great season that I need to lump him in there. They don't have a pitcher. The one guy I would include in this, and he will likely win the American League Cy Young, but Sandy Alcantara. Doesn't mean he can't win the MVP. He's been so important to his team. And as I mentioned, there's only so many guys. The other guy I would loop in there for the Braves is Austin Riley. He's been their most important hitter. He's turned into a very good third baseman. So those are my 4 names for National League MVP at the halfway point that I look at as really big favorites. But, the Cardinals, Goldschmidt, Arenado, they brought back Pujols for a swan song. Yadier Molina's in his last season. I believe Adam Wainwright's in his last season at age 40. So this team's not going to be the same next season. They need to be aggressive. They want to win their division, go into the postseason, and see what they can do. Just like the Brewers. The Brewers, I think, have a lot of pressure with their manager. If they have another poor season, if they miss the playoffs even, with Christian Yelich, with Corbin Burnes, with Andrew McCutchen, who they brought in, they got a roster that should be playoff eligible. And if they miss, I expect a lot of pressure from this group to make big changes and to shake things up in Milwaukee. The rest of the NL Central really aren't threats. The Pirates, the Cubs, and the Cincinnati Reds are going to miss the playoffs. The Reds ultimately had the worst start, but to me, of these 3 teams, they're the best team. They don't have a whole lot. They don't have a lot of great things about the Reds. They are last in this division, but they are a game behind the Cubs, and they are 5 behind Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, the one attraction you could say they have is they have Ke'Bryan Hayes, who plays third. He's a fun guy to watch at third base, and they have O'Neal Cruz, who's a 6'7" shortstop. You never see that. He can he threw a ball the other day 97.8 miles per hour to first. Like he's something else, O'Neal Cruz. So that's the Cubs. I can't even sell you on them. They bottomed out. They were just smart enough not to re-sign Chris Bryant, who the Colorado Rockies did that, and that worked out so well, where Noah got it right there. But that's the rest of this division. They're sellers. That's what I can say. Maybe Kevin Newman gets moved from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's got a lot of young players that I don't think they'll want to part with. Cubs, potentially Patrick Wisdom. I don't think they'll trade Wilson Contreras, the catcher. He's far too valuable. He's the leader of that team. Daniel Vogelbach for the Pirates is a guy they could potentially move. He's a guy that has a terrible average, but he will drive runs in, and he's a guy that could be on a bench and pinch hit during the playoffs. For Cincinnati, again, they got a lot of young talent as well. Hunter Greene is their pitcher, the future. They like him a lot. Brandon Drury could be a guy they trade. He's never had this good of a season. He's been through New York. He's been through Toronto. He's batting .278 this season with 18 home runs and 52 runs batted in. He's never had this good of a season. And he likely would never do it again. But a team might say, you know what, we'll take a chance on Brandon Drury at the deadline. He's a versatile guy. He can play second. He can play third. He can play all over the infield. So Brandon Drury could be a guy that you see the Cincinnati Reds trade to get some draft picks, get some assets in return for a guy that likely will never play this good again. But yeah, the rest of it, I mean, you look at this roster too for Cincinnati, they have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 17 players on the injured reserve right now. There are some guys I look here that I think teams would be interested in. Luis Sessa is a relief pitcher that has a lot of experience in baseball. Mike Moustakas has been around the block. Albert Almora Jr. is an interesting center fielder who was formerly with the Chicago Cubs. Ross Detweiler has pitched a ton for the Diamondbacks and around baseball, including the Cubs as well. So maybe Cincinnati will be active at the deadline when it comes to trading players to contending teams. And then that brings us to the National League West. The Dodgers are a machine. You look at the Yankees this year and you look at the Dodgers and you wonder why they're so successful. Well, here's why. Dodgers, Julio Rodriguez, Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, Tony Gonsolin, Tyler Anderson. That's their starting five pitching. Walker Buehler has been hurt for a while. He hasn't had the greatest season. Tyler Anderson has lost one start. Tony Gonsolin has lost one start. They both have sub 2.30 ERAs. Kershaw has had a bounce back year. He's had 2 games this year where he brought a perfect game into the 8th inning. And Julio Rodriguez hasn't had as good a season he did last year. He won over 20 games, but he's still a great pitcher, one of the best in all of baseball. Again, it has been Justin Turner has fallen back. Cody Bellinger has fallen back. Mookie Betts isn't as productive as he used to be. But the starting pitching for the Dodgers is truly incredible. What they've done, this Dodgers team. The health, other than Buehler, the success when it comes to just, I love the way this team has pitched. They play as a team. They play with confidence. And the Dodgers are an impressive organism where they just find success. Although Tyler Anderson was brought in from the Pirates, he finds success. Tony Gonsolin was brought in. He was with the Reds at one point. He's been around the block. He pitched for the Mets. So he's been around the block. He finds some success. That's just what happens with the Dodgers. And yeah, they'll have good numbers. They'll have guys that have good batting numbers. You get a lot of runs batted in. But it helps when you have great starting pitching. Craig Kimbrell is their closer. He's okay. They let Kenley Jensen go to the Braves because they felt that Craig Kimbrell was an upgrade. I would agree with that. Jensen's been a huge part of the reason why the Dodgers haven't won some close games the past number of seasons. Their bullpen isn't there, but to me, you look at Yankees, Dodgers. Their starting pitching is what you come to first. You go, wow, that's a deep pitching core, and wow, they stay healthy, and they give you length in games. And it's a reverse to what you're seeing is, okay, we're building from the bullpen and batters out, and our starting pitching is just okay. I think the Rays have done that, and they haven't won a World Series. They built some really good bullpens. Their starting pitching is kind of replaceable because they don't love to have great starting pitchers. Their starting pitchers don't go length. Recall they didn't play Blake Snell past the 6th inning in the World Series game that ultimately won it for the Dodgers. That's something that comes to mind. Dodgers and Yankees have great staffs, and they're winning because of it and because of health, but they deserve credit for both. So the Dodgers, I think, to me, they lost Seager in the offseason. That was a big loss to Texas. I think they could use another bat. I love Trey Turner. He's one of the most consistent hitters in all of baseball. Mookie Betts is a stud in right field. But I think another bat could really help this team. It doesn't have to be a huge name because this team is already loaded. But I mentioned Juan Soto. Why not? Why not swing for the fences? And then I think you could re-sign him. It would be a reverse Max Scherzer, where to me, you traded for him as a rental because you knew he was going to get a whole lot of money somewhere else. Juan Soto could stay in Los Angeles if they really want him, because they'll pay the money and they'll move out contracts if the payroll is going to be too much. To stay competitive, you have Juan Soto in left, you have Mookie Betts in right, and you have Cody Bellinger in center potentially for the next number of seasons. That's a dangerous outfield, and it's a team that's going to be competing for a very long time. Because Urias is still young. Walker Buehler is still a young pitcher. Gonsolin is not elder, and Anderson's a young pitcher as well. This team could still compete for a very long time. So, just a thought, but Juan Soto to the Dodgers makes sense. Padres. I mean, on paper, this team shouldn't be this good. Fernando Tatis Jr. III has not played a game, as I mentioned. Blake Snell has been awful. He's got close to a 6 ERA. Mike Clevenger's been solid, coming off Tommy John surgery. He's been really good. Machado's an all-star. Eric Hosmer, who they tried to trade his contract before the season, is batting .276. He's had a solid start to the season. They're getting production from guys you wouldn't necessarily expect. Hoo-Sung Kim and position players that just come in and play game to game. But the Padres have been a good story. They're starting to see a dip. You're starting to see them lose some more games, which is concerning. Mitch Gore has been moved from starting pitching to the bullpen for the Padres. They cannot have another season where they miss the playoffs. They have the third highest payroll. They got Yu Darvish. They got Snell. They got Mike Clevenger. This team, they got Joe Musgrove, who's had a fantastic season so far. Sean Manaea, who hasn't had a great season. But again, a really good pitcher who they acquired from the Oakland Athletics before the season started. With their starting pitching and Tatis Jr. coming back at some point, likely in August, maybe September, if you can believe it, this team needs to make the play, and they should. Because I like their roster. I love Arenado and some of the players on the Cardinals. But to me, it's a better story than it is a team. Arenado is better than Tatis Jr. Arenado is better than any player on the San Diego Padres. But the team, I like the staff better than I do in St. Louis. And I think the only thing that hurts the Padres is the division they play in. You got to play the Dodgers a lot down the stretch. And you also got to play the San Francisco Giants, who are still in the wild card hunt as well. The Giants will be battling with St. Louis, be battling with the Brewers, battling with the Phillies. San Fran, Carlos Rodon's been a great signing. Logan Webb has had another great season. I mentioned Descafani hasn't been great. I like Dominic Leone. I like Riddell in the bullpen. But their bats, I mean, they got a veteran group of veteran batters. You got Brandon Crawford still on this team. You still have, you look through, Evan Longoria is still here. They got an older ball team, and last year to me was an anomaly, and this is where Noah was right. I expected this team to have a big fall from grace. I don't expect them to make the playoffs. I think they'll battle the whole season. But they play the Dodgers starting Thursday night, a 4-game set. That's a big series. Not for San Francisco to get back in the division race, because they're not going to, but remain in the wild card hunt. Because St. Louis and the Brewers are good teams, but they're battling for division. But you got to stay close to the Padres. Stay close with these teams, see what you can do. But looking at it, a lot of interesting series is down the stretch. Mets, Braves, when they play each other, those are must-see games. Dodgers, Padres, Giants, interesting. I still think the Dodgers against some teams will be interesting for a little bit, but the Dodgers do have a sizable lead in that division. St. Louis, Milwaukee, they're separated by a half game right now. Those are must-see games because of how close the two teams are. Philly against either the Mets or the Braves is interesting as well. The AL Central, Minnesota, Cleveland, Chicago, the mix of those three teams are interesting. And then you got, I think, for Blue Jays, Red Sox start this Friday. That's an interesting series that has a lot of intrigue. Blue Jays against the Tampa Bay Rays. I mean, these are all going to be wild card races. And what would be interesting to track is how Aaron Judge does in the second half of the year, if he can continue and get to possibly 60 home runs. He's got 33 thus far. It's a lot of baseball. We got a second half of the season upcoming. Like I said, I expect to be captivating. August 2nd trade deadline is another interesting moment, another interesting time for the league, where these teams, who's trying to be aggressive, who's selling, and the next couple, we come back Thursday for baseball. They don't get a long All-Star break. And August 2nd, I believe, is 2 weeks after that. So we'll basically have a week and a half after this All-Star break to see how you're playing, and teams have to make a decision from there. For some teams, it's obvious. You stink. But there are still some teams in the middle, like a Baltimore, like a Philadelphia, that you're looking to see, are we for real or are we just posers? I think I know, but again, we have to wait and see. And series like Dodgers-Giants that starts Thursday night is a big one to really see who's for real and who's not. All-Star game tonight, McClanahan versus Kershaw. Hope you guys enjoy it. I plan to do a show tomorrow. We will have some content. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show on baseball. If you got any questions, if you got anything you want to ask me, let me know, and I'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. But we'll find something to talk about for sure. A lot of baseball, potentially a football podcast tomorrow, and maybe some hockey news breaks out as well, or other news around the world of sports that we can get into. So have a great rest of the day. Stay healthy, stay safe. We'll talk soon.